One of the most successful ways of convincing a friend to play a game is comparing it to a game they've already played and enjoyed. As an example, I recommended Death's Door to my friends because they played and enjoyed Hyper Light Drifter, and I think both of these games are functionally very similar. From the perspective, to the combat, to the exploration, to the bosses, there is just a lot of comparisons you can draw between the two to infer that someone would enjoy one if they enjoyed the other. I play a lot of games, so I always feel like I have a good suggestion or comparison for a game to play if a friend needs one. But there is one outlier in my Steam library, that being Rainworld. Even the question of what is Rainworld is harder to articulate than most games. The game's Steam description reads, "You are a nomadic slug cat, both predator and prey in a broken ecosystem. Grab your spear and brave the industrial wastes, hunting enough food to survive, but be wary, other, bigger creatures have the same plan, and slug cats look delicious." The only thing you can really infer from that alone is that it's maybe a survival game. Okay, so let's check the Steam tags. Difficult. That doesn't tell us anything, but it's true. Atmospheric. That could be any game that isn't a white box, though it is one of the most atmospheric games I've played. Survival. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Exploration. This tells us the game is maybe quite open. 2D platformer. Alright, so we can expect some platforming going into this. Souls-like. I don't know about that one. Steam tags are maybe not the best place to look. The community can also apply tags to games, so these aren't purely curated by the developers of the game. So there is always a chance that you will see some interesting or outright wrong tags. Having more than 200 hours in the game, surely I can come up with a satisfactory description of Rainworld. For the first 4 hours, it's a rage game. From what I gather, there's this universal experience of playing for a handful of hours then dropping the game, only to come back weeks or months later. But on a serious note, I think the clearest genre across the board is survival. You have to manage a food bar, and you have to survive the environment and the predators and even some neutral creatures if you make a grave mistake. But I wouldn't classify it as purely a survival game, as I don't think it functions the same as most survival games. Like, I wouldn't suggest someone plays Rainworld because they enjoyed the forest. Rainworld is also a 2D platformer, though I think this one is used very loosely. In many places, such as the Wall, Sky Islands, or Chimney Canopy, there is a lot of platforming, especially over death drops, which adds to the difficulty. But again, I don't think this functions the same as most platformers. You often don't get any form of reward for finishing a platforming section, except maybe a shelter to save progress. Whereas in something like Celeste, for example, you will often be rewarded with a B-side, which is essentially a secret level that you unlock within the level. Or the reward itself is beating the level. It would be like if Celeste was open world and instead of beating levels, there was just one ending and the point was to explore and survive. Okay, I'm getting a little carried away here. This is all to say Rainworld is a very unique game that I'm still struggling with categorizing. And that's not to say I think that it needs to be categorized. It doesn't. But I just keep coming back to this idea that every other game I've played I can categorize with other games that share multiple similar aspects, whether it be gameplay, story, genre, etc. And it wasn't until recently that I found out other people have this same problem with Rainworld. I asked my community tab for game suggestions similar to Rainworld, and considering Outer Wilds came up twice, I don't think I got the results I was hoping for. Because of this phenomena, Rainworld gets put in some really weird categories across the internet. Rainworld appeared in a humble bundle deal called Must Play Metroidvanias, alongside the likes of Hollow Knight and Haiku the Robot. But is Rainworld a Metroidvania? Well, the 15th Steam tag says so, so it must be. According to Wikipedia, a Metroidvania is a subgenre of action-adventure games and/or platformers focused on guided non-linearity and utility-gated exploration and progression. You could consider Rainworld an action-adventure game and a platformer, but I'd say it's more open world than non-linear, and you can essentially go anywhere off the bat. There isn't a double jump gated area. The only system stopping you is the karma system to advance to different regions, but that isn't something you unlock, it's something you have to juggle from the very start. And as for a grander look at utility-gated exploration, the only gated area in the game is the depths, which is gated behind 10 karma, and you could consider echoes talking to you gated behind the mark of communication you get from pebbles. So at best, I'd say Rainworld shares some similarities with the Metroidvania genre, but it's a little brash to outright claim it functions in any capacity similarly to a game like Hollow Knight, where you are usually limited on where you can go until you unlock certain abilities, and there are a lot more systems at play compared to Rainworld, where you only need to worry about if you have enough karma to progress or enough food to sleep. But that being said, there is undeniably a large crossover of fanbases between Hollow Knight and Rainworld, considering my friends who have played Rainworld have also played Hollow Knight. But don't take my experience and word for it, there is a decent overlap in subreddits between the two games, and this was another game that got suggested in my community post and some threads I found asking for similar games to Rainworld on Reddit. Outside of the dystopian setting that both games take place in, they both play entirely different from one another. So my best guess at the connection between the two games and communities is just that they're both very high quality indie games that share a similar form of environmental storytelling and atmospheric world building. One of the most unique aspects of Rainworld is undeniably its AI, and I don't mean ChatGPT. The creature AI is unlike any game I have ever played. It feels like an actual ecosystem rather than scripted enemy encounters. The creatures have a chance to spawn in a specific place, but they will not always stay nearby. You could find them in a different room every time you go through that area. In many other games, you are the only one that enemies will attack, but in Rainworld, there are a lot of creatures that will attack or eat each other. This paired with the fact that creatures will act independently from you even when they are in entirely different rooms, sets up the chance for you to stumble upon some interesting encounters that makes you feel like you are not the main character. The only game I've played that even comes remotely close to this feeling is Sons of the Forest. In Sons of the Forest, you crash land on an island and are left to fend for yourself, making a shelter, finding food, and surviving the night. Soon after exploring, you'll start to notice you are not alone on this island. You'll start to see these people watching you from a distance and seemingly studying you. Turns out these are cannibals that want to kill you, but the AI is very interesting. They'll sometimes just keep their distance and observe you. When you approach them, they will either run away scared or run at you ready to fight. The AI has a little jank sometimes, but if nothing else, it definitely achieves its goal of being very creepy. But this example is the closest thing I have experienced that even remotely replicates the scavengers from Rainworld. That same feeling of running into a solo scav and not knowing if it will take your head off or be chill, because even though your reputation with scavs starts out neutral, they still could just kill you if they feel threatened. Plus, they sometimes just stare at you with their big ass eyes, and that's on the same level as the cannibals stalking you. And then there's also the scav tolls and the cannibal camps, places where the AI congregate. I don't know, I just thought these were some funny resemblances because these games are nothing alike, outside of both being survival games. Okay, well, what about the story? In Rainworld, you are thrown into a brutal and unforgiving world. For the first few hours, you will feel like you are given absolutely nothing in terms of guidance, until suddenly that funny little yellow creature following you starts helping you? It doesn't give you a lot, but it gives you enough to know there is a shelter nearby, or there's something of story significance in the direction it's pointing you in. It's such a weird and unique way of pushing the player in the right direction, hoping they don't end up trying to brute force farm arrays for the first few hours of the game. Nightmare region. But this method makes it feel very rewarding when you finally find the iterator that you've been seeing images of on your pilgrimage across the map. Most of the story is told through the environment, considering there are only 2 supercomputers that talk to you and a handful of echoes, which are former members of the species that made the supercomputers, but essentially in purgatory form. This is all to say, there isn't a whole lot of hand-holding in the storytelling and mechanics of the game, which felt reminiscent when I played Outer Wilds not too long ago. Sure, there is a lot more dialogue and reading to be done in Outer Wilds, but I feel that the way you uncover this information to progress the story is very environmental, and that's to say there is a lot of storytelling within the environment itself outside of the text you find. I don't want to spoil this game because it's phenomenal and anyone who hasn't played it should experience it spoiler-free, so I won't go deep into the story. but you essentially explore a handcrafted solar system while investigating the ruins of an ancient alien race. On an entirely unrelated note, in Rainworld you play as a slug cat, exploring the ruins of an ancient? The Ancients? Alien race? Meeting characters left behind and trying to piece together what happened. Sound familiar? So even though these two games are entirely different from one another, I can see why they would both appeal to similar people. Both of these games have a very figure-it-out-for-yourself approach to both gameplay and story. Plus, the world building of both of these games makes the player feel insignificant. Neither of these games feel like a power trip fantasy. You feel like you just exist in this world rather than feeling like the protagonist in a world built specifically for you. It feels like this world existed long before you and will exist long after you. Rainworld teaches you to eat food before sheltering, and pounce across gaps. Outside of that, the game doesn't care about you. It throws you into the world and says figure it out. You have to learn how to use the tools of the world and how the creatures interact with you purely through trial and error. You have to face these situations head on without a manual or tutorial. In Animal Well, you are taught how to eat, barely, and how to save the game. Outside of that, the game doesn't care about you. It throws you into the world and says, figure it out. You will be presented with a new tool with no explanation, but most likely a chance to use it nearby, figuring out solutions to puzzles without any form of real tutorial. I don't know how to put it into words, but Animal Well might be the closest game I've played to Rainworld. Which is strange because, again, like the other games I've mentioned, they are entirely different games, and I don't mean they play similar, because they don't, just something about the feeling of the game. Very early on in my Animal Well playthrough, I had this primal love for the game, and it felt like it came from the same place as my love for Rainworld, and maybe it's those similar themes and figuring it all out for yourself, but you just need to play this game if you are a fan of Rainworld or puzzles or being lost. There will never be another Rainworld, but there doesn't have to be. This video only came about because I was initially making a video playing games similar to Rainworld, so I asked my own community for suggestions and even searched up other threads online, hoping that some game would just appear that had striking resemblances, but it never did. I was initially left with this kind of sadness that I didn't find some perfect answer, but the more I thought about it, the more I was glad that we got Rainworld. The more I looked for similar games, the more I realized how much of a miracle it is that a game like Rainworld exists, and furthermore has an incredible community and still gets updates and DLCs. Sure, I'd love another Rainworld, but then Rainworld wouldn't be as special. And as I've discussed in this video, if you really think outside the box, there are plenty of phenomenal games that share similarities. I don't know what this video really was, but hopefully somewhere in all the rambling was some sort of love letter to how unique Rainworld is. And if you managed to watch this far through, truly thank you for watching, and I'll leave you with this question. What is your favorite Rainworld adjacent game?